Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with an apocalyptic Charles Coulombe.
Apocalyptic. As in the end of the world.
Yeah.
As in, I see a bad moon horizon.
You can't get off that song. You've been singing
I
it
can't.
on pre-show. You just...
Well, I got a right to. I mean, I see hurricanes and lightning. It's the lamest apocalypse ever, as we said months ago. It just gets stupider and stupider.
And that should be the theme song.
Yes, it should be. This is what we should all be singing. I see a bad moon horizon. Oh yeah, yeah. Creedence knew. They knew, and I tell you, it's getting wilder and wilder. And now, Madam Justice Ginsburg has thumbed her nose at us all on her way out the door.
Yeah, that's sad.
Well, sad or not, it's brought us to a particularly amusing situation, to where the Senate will rush through a nominee for the Supreme Court. And the Democrats will yell and scream, but they won't be able to do anything about it. And then, as we discussed before, if they don't do this, then the inevitable challenge to the election will be seen by a court that's capable of a tie. And that's not very good. But in rushing somebody through, the Democrats will jump up and down, claim foul partisan politics, because the Republicans refused to hear any of Obama's nominees until he was out of office. But on the other hand, it's not like they didn't play partisan politics themselves in the whole impeachment thing. So, I mean, the problem is, you're in an area now, a time when nothing means anything anyway. People just babble whatever they want to babble. And the worst of it is that this is all meant to affect how people are going to vote in November. But the truth is, I think there isn't an undecided person left in America. I think that with every shop that goes up in flames, another Trump voter is born. And I have no doubt, I could be wrong, but I have no doubt that he'll be reelected. And I would be not at the least surprised if the Republicans regain control of the House. But if we're in a situation where the Republicans have control of the House, both houses of Congress, and in effect the Supreme Court, there'll be two things. One, the Democrats will go mad. And the Antifas, the BLMs, and the Shody-Dos, and all the rest of them, they will, let's just say it won't be happy times for them. And I also predict that George Soros probably will need to pack his bags and go bye-bye. Pull up stakes, and get his gypsy wagon on the road. Because I have a strange feeling that a post-election Trump is kind of gonna not like him. And Mr. Trump could be a little vindictive, I think. The second thing, though, is that should that happen, the Republicans will have no excuse for anything anymore.
Doesn't stop either side. Ever.
No, of course it doesn't.
After 8 years of Obama, black people are more oppressed than ever. Well, what did Obama do then? I mean...
Well, what he did was help exacerbate racial tension. Yeah. And my personal favorite was, of course, his attempt to cut off federal funding for public schools that refused to allow boys to use girls' rooms and girls' locker rooms. So it's better, in other words, that poor children should not get their free lunches than boys not be able to go. I mean, I don't know what kind of a mind thinks that way. But see, there's the other thing. I was stuck with Obama for 8 years, but he was the president, and I lived with it. And the Democrats really, they need to do the same thing with the Trumpster. I mean, I don't particularly like him either, but I have never lived except for 8 glorious years under Reagan. I've never lived under a president I really liked. Of course, the obvious answer to that is, and why should you? Who do you think you are anyway?
They were moaning and everybody was moaning and groaning and blaming the riots on Trump, looting and rioting. And I said, I just couldn't take it anymore. So I had to respond. I said, you know what? I completely agree. When all of Baltimore was on fire, Obama did it with style and class.
Yeah.
And I got life. They actually did catch. They actually, they didn't get that I was being facetious.
No.
They actually, Obama.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. #1, yeah.
They were so out of touch with reality that they couldn't tell that I was being facetious.
Well, no, and we've gotten people. The combination of dour and stupid it's a hard one. It really is. But it's going to be cray whatever happens. And however, if, as I suspect, he'll be reelected, then the terrible blowback against the woke culture that I fear will be postponed for 4 years. If, on the other hand, Harris is elected president, by her own admission.
I can't believe she said that. I can't believe she said the Harris administration. Because on these things, it's like you always wonder in a conspiracy like that. It's like, is it unconscious? Is it subconscious? Is everyone really thinking like that? And it's like, oh yeah, actually yes.
It's just honesty. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with truth? What's wrong with candor? You want the poor lady to lie?
What's wrong? In a way, we see more about democracy now than ever. We're seeing how democracy really works. I didn't follow the primary too closely, but I'm pretty sure she didn't even get third place. She dropped out so early on, and then so the people didn't want her. They wanted this old man, and then the old man gets the ticket, and then she gets on the ticket, and no one's excited about who they voted for, and everyone's excited about who they skipped over. Wait, what?
It's the old bait and switch.
And then there was a hashtag selected, not elected, where the powers that be decide that Harris is going to be it no matter what the people vote.
Yeah, and that's it. And of course, the other thing, too, I mean, you'll find it's impossible to discuss Trump's policies with people. If they hate him, they hate him. Well, which of his policies do you decide? No, I hate him. He's horrible. Oh, okay, I got that part. You don't like him, but what is it that he has done that you really dislike? Well, he's horrible. Okay. Is it because he appointed non-anti-abort Supreme Court justices? Well, no.
Rapist Supreme Court justices.
Well, no, they were retired rapists. The rapist is gone. Well, I mean, it's like with Joe Biden. He's no longer remember, he was a sexual predator when Mrs. Harris was running for the primary. But at some point, he was cleansed.
Right.
And so now she doesn't have a problem. Of course, she's going to be president anyway. So it all makes sense if you don't pay close attention. So, having said all of that, I think what we need to understand is that we are in uncharted territory, ladies and gentlemen. And
did the Republicans say that they're going to put through this? The judge.
I've heard a lot of buzz, but I've heard nothing official, so I don't know.
That's so hypocritical of everything we went through last year. And it's like, oh, well, we always wait till the newly elected president does this. And now to just flip-flop on that, it's just such It's a bad look. It's gross. We have
Uh,
the election is in less than 2 months, and I think we've got enough garbage on our plate right now.
no, we don't. There's got to be more.
Just for the sake of everyone, just
No,
let's manage it. Let's space this out a little bit at least,
no, no,
right?
no, no.
No,
It's like the earthquake in California. You
oh
know,
yeah,
there's not enough.
yeah. We had
There's never enough.
this was the closest one we've ever had to Arcadia, decent size in San Gabriel. 4.5 really scared me last night. It was a jolty. It was a jolty
Yeah,
one.
I know. I heard that the sprinklers went off in the Tumbler Tower.
Yeah, it was scary. But we got through it. Nothing we couldn't handle. Business as usual. So
Yeah,
what?
yeah. You know what I did with my Facebook account. You know what I posted?
Tell us.
Well, it was the flaming city with the annotation. An official statement will be released later. The city's in flames, and then someone wrote in. It looks like somebody did something. And my my response was, the situation is under investigation. Advise caution. Which brings me back to Bad Moon Rising. And of course my new Marvel hero, Jack-o'-lantern.
Definitely jack-o'-lantern-ish right there, where
Yeah.
some men just want to watch the whole world burn. Wow.
Well, it's, what are you gonna do? I mean, you see, if ever the limits of the myth of democracy were being shown for all to gawk at, it's now. We have the quote unquote fake news. You can't really trust anything anybody says in public life. Nothing means anything. Nothing's connected to anything, and nobody knows anything anyway. The educational level is so low, both amongst leaders and their subjects. It's the stupiditas omnia vincit. Stupidity conquers all. They used to say it was love, but trust me, it's stupidity. I mean, I find that all the young people I know, it doesn't matter how natively intelligent they are, thanks to the collapse of our educational system, they don't know anything about American history, American literature, or American civics. And they're being told all this drivel by this academics and the media mouthpieces and all the rest of the drivelous crew that drive the engines of public opinion. And they don't know any better. Columbus killed the Indians. Really? Really? So you mean like the time Columbus killed Sitting Bull with his bare hands? Yeah. I see. They lived several hundred years apart. Oh, yeah? Who told you that? Just something I heard once.
That reminds me of your nephew Michael's story, arguing with the person about C.S. Lewis,
Oh, gosh.
who was a
Yeah.
drug addict.
Yeah.
Have you even read Alice in Wonderland?
Poor Mike was like, what do you say? What do you say when one person is that stupid? I think she said it with such conviction.
Yeah.
Now multiply that by thousands of little munchkins unleashed from colleges, wearing their little Antifa shirts and jumping up and down and feeling really good about themselves, moralistic, power to the people. Yeah, well, the problem is you're going to empower the people, but the people that you're going to empower are Trump supporters. And I don't say this, when I say Trump supporters, I don't mean in the sense anyone who supports Trump is a thug. I don't even mean the people who will be outraged and will open fire on Antifa crowds are thugs. I don't mean it that way in the slightest. And you can be pushed too far by morons, especially if morons start burning your neighborhood. After a while, you get kind of unhappy, especially if the police have been defunded and you're stuck relying on yourself. But those are the situations that call forth the worst in us, because it's when we literally have to defend ourselves that we become the most vicious. But then again, what else are we going to do?
Yeah.
You can't. This is why we've had a couple of people get annoyed with me by saying, "Oh well, you're sharing the enemy's denigration of Trump's support." No, I'm not. What I'm saying is that the situation that we're being pushed toward is one that will call this up. And people being people, they will not stop eventually with simply defending their neighborhoods.
This, what you say immediately reminded me of my favorite line from what I've read so far in Blessed Charles of Austria by Charles Coulombe, A Holy Emperor and His Legacy.
Heavens to Betsy!
So
I don't even have one of those.
Yeah, they've all arrived at the Tumbler House facility. So thank you for everyone who's pre-ordered. One caveat, though. So Tan Books has respectfully asked that all resellers hold off on shipping the books until September 23rd, because that's the official publication date. They want everyone on an even keel. They don't want give someone an advantage on whoever is shipping them first. So unfortunately, my hands are tied. We're sitting on a ton of books. So I'm going to ship them on Wednesday. So order them now. I think
operators are standing by.
Void were prohibited. No CODs.
Sorry, no CODs.
Sorry, no CODs. Limited time offer.
While supplies last.
Everything must go.
Big warehouse sale.
How
much are they a piece?
It's $27 or $28. So they inherently come with free shipping if you buy this. But a popular bundle has been Puritan's Empire plus Blessed Charles. A very popular, or Star Spangled Crown. People are doubling up.
But that's not all. There's more.
Send in a book review. Get $5 off your order. And
I knew there was more.
Says people have asked me, if you order $25 worth of books, and then get $5 off, making your order $20, do you still get free shipping? Answer is yes. I've checked, and you still get free shipping.
Free shipping and handling.
That's right, Charles. All right. Anyhow, I want to.
Not an actor.
All right, I want to read one of my favorite paragraphs. Now, this is actually just from the preface. Charles wrote the preface. And so he says, over 100 years since the end of World War I, the 20th century's rejection of the religious and political values that built Western civilization have brought us to the point where abortion is, for many in public and private life, a sacred right. In more recent years, acceptance of gender confusion has joined freedom of infanticide as the measure of refined behavior. In a word, the formerly Christian world has given itself over to its lowest vices. What has it gained in return? Ever-increasing hatred between classes, races, and the sexes, falling standards of every sort to include personal civility, and the implosion of both family life and the birth rate. Our technology has vastly grown over the past decades and brought us many choice gifts, which we often misuse. Moreover, where once we were able to produce leaders of magnitude and love them or hate them, Churchill, de Gaulle, Eisenhower, and the rest who won the Second World War certainly qualified, we seem unable to do so today. What is true of political life is also true of culture, the arts, and all else. And just my favorite sense in this is the Christian world has given itself over to its lowest vices. And we've seen that on everything. We see it on social media. Everything's impulsive. Everything's some sort of vice, anger, fear, um, lack of just everything, lust, greed. There's just so much, and we've given ourselves over to that. Ambition, pride. Everywhere you look, it's inescapable. In a in a in such a way.
Are you are
But
you saying Cuties is an improper series?
yes,
Ah, all right. Just asking.
talking about giving yourself over to the lowest vices. I mean, wow. Anyhow, but I think the reason why that paragraph is in that book is because Charles is trying to show that Blessed Charles and Empress Zita were in similar situations. They're examples to follow in because they had the same sort of troubles, did they not?
They did, and of course, in a sense, worse because they were personally threatened
Yeah,
in a way that we're just not.
yeah,
And they embraced the threat. They were willing to die for their peoples, which is a kind of leadership that we're simply not used to. You know, one of the things that became very clear to me in studying these two is that a lot of people are interested in either their religious message and don't want to look at their political, or they're interested in their political message and don't want to look at their religious message. You find both. I mean, especially here in Europe, in terms of the political rather than the religious, where they know them a lot better than we do back home. Back home, the people who know them primarily in terms of their religion. What people do not understand is that you can't separate them. I mean, they didn't. They were obviously very, very much a piece of a piece. Their religion was what formed and guided their politics, and their politics were the way they expressed their religion. It was a seamless garment, to coin a phrase, and that's embarrassing. And they are an embarrassment to us in a lot of ways. I mean, number one, for Americans, they're embarrassing simply because ultimately our president did them in. You know, we have to live with the fact, whether we like it or not, that President Wilson worked the destruction of probably the noblest reigning couple Europe had seen in 100 years, maybe 200. And we have to accept the fact that we did that, that our master, I'm sorry, the product of the people, well, whatever you want to call him, when they pulled his name off the school at Georgetown this past year because of his racism, I kind of giggled because in life, so often people get away with what they're guilty for and then are punished for some other thing, which, yeah, he was a racist, all right. He introduced segregation to the District of Columbia, which they hadn't had before he was president. Of course, then again, he was raised in Virginia during Reconstruction, so everything has its own payback in one way or the other. But that's our thing that we have to deal with. Over here in Central Europe, the governments of the peoples, the politicians, somehow have to accept the fact that politicians whom their propagandized history, as propagandized as ours, have told them were heroes, were the ones who screwed these guys over, if you pardon the vulgarity. I mean, that's Masaryk, Admiral Horthy, Karl Renner, all these people did in this wonderful couple, betrayed them. And now it's becoming more and more apparent how much, and historians are finally beginning to realize this as the mist of the Great War passes after a century. They're beginning to realize just how much them in particular and the Habsburgs as a whole did for Central Europe. And I mean, they did a huge amount. They molded the very countryside. because their provisions, their laws, which are done with a great deal of thought, created what you see now. And even in the countries, strangely enough, I mean, it's one thing in the core lands, Austria, Hungary, Czechia, Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia. That's one thing. But you go to the frontiers, as it were, like Poland, Ukraine, Romania, Serbia, northern Italy. The difference between the areas that were ruled by the Habsburgs and the areas that were not, even though they're one people, quote unquote, are still huge. Voting patterns, attitudes toward government, levels of corruption. It's amazing how closely they follow the old frontiers in every single case. So you see, they and their descendants have been woefully misused, woefully abused. And we have to accept that fact. It's the only way we can begin. I mean, you can't begin to atone for an evil you've done until you admit that you've done it. And that brings me to the last point I'll make about them, which is really is a point to their sanctity. On the day of his death, and his death was miserable, he was in huge pain. He kept saying, I am suffering that my peoples might come back together. He died loving the very people that had done him in. I couldn't have done it. After what they put him and his wife and his family through, and the uncertain future that he was leaving them to, there is no way that if I had been in his shoes, I could have gone out like that. I would have gone out cursing them. Probably would have gone to hell, but anyway, that's what I would have done. I cannot imagine being put through what that man was put through and die loving them. I just can't. So, why is it important that we know about Kaiser Karl and Empress Zita? There are actually a lot of reasons, but not the least is to have an example of really decent people dealing with everything collapsing around them. And believe me, the Austria-Hungary of 1918 was not unlike planet Krypton, except there was no escape to Earth.
Really?
No, all there was exile. And believe me, there's a world of difference between escape and exile. Take it from me. So they found themselves first in Switzerland and then Madeira. And when they got to Madeira, the Entente made sure they had no money. It could be argued that his death was a sort of martyrdom, because he would not have died had he received decent medical care. But he had no money, and the only doctors that were available to him in Madeira were not that great. Had the same thing happened 20 years later, there would have been antibiotics. Thank you. There would have been antibiotics, which would have fixed him. But they didn't have them in those days. He would have needed much, much greater care, and that wasn't available in Madeira. And of course, he was living during the winter in a summer house that brought him illness anyway. So his blood, to a great degree, lies on the hands of the Entente, the United States, Britain, and France. And that's not happy making. But it is interesting to me that there are 14, soon to be 15 shrines to him in the United States.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I should be coy and say you'll have to read the book as I deal with the question. But I suspect there are a couple of reasons for it. One, is that this sort of sacrificial leadership is totally alien to our experience. There is something extraordinary. And now that he's in heaven, he's a very appealing figure. You know, he's someone we can certainly pray to for help and know that we'll get it one way or the other. The second thing, though, is national. You know, one of my jokes is that the United States are the world's longest lasting and most successful Oedipus complex. We got rid of Daddy in 1783, and except when there's a crisis, and then we make up a new daddy like President Lincoln or President Roosevelt or whoever emerges out of this mess. Other than that, we don't have a daddy, and we tell ourselves we don't need him, and yet we yearn for him. So what do? We create him out of whole cloth, actors or athletes or film stars. And we treat them like royalty.
Who's the mom figure in this metaphor?
Sorry?
Who is the mother figure?
Golly. Mother Nature. Columbia.
Right.
You know, any metaphor eventually fails, just so you'll know.
Sure. I just wanted to see you squirm a little bit.
Did I squirm sufficiently?
Sufficiently, yes. So, all right. So, get Blessed Charles of Austria, Holy Emperor and His Legacy. Beautiful book, hardcover.
Can you show the pictures, please?
Oh, that's right. There's beautiful colored pictures in here. Let me get it. Well, not colored pictures, but oh, there's a colored picture. There's that.
Oh gosh, that is lovely.
And let's.
See, I haven't seen the book. This is heavens. Yeah, there is a young man. There's the wedding. Sure. Yeah, there they are together. There's young Otto. There's the coronation.
Bunch of other things.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there they are riding along.
We got some more.
Oh my, yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah. And even more. And there's more pictures. I'm not gonna go through all of the pictures, but
no, but this is great for me because I haven't seen the book yet, and I probably won't see it until late November.
Sad. Well,
what's even sadder is I can't sign any copies.
Oh, that's true. Very true. But we can have hope that one day all copies will be signed.
If I make it home for Christmas, I will sit there and sign everything you've got, and then we can make a real special deal on signed copies.
Can we count on you?
To be home for Christmas? Now, if only in your dreams. No, I don't know. I really have no idea at this juncture if I'll make it home for Christmas. I really have no idea.
Alrighty. All right,
a lot depends on a lot of events beyond my control.
Yeah, the New World Order and what they want to do moving forward. All right.
Yeah, an official statement will be issued.
All right, time for the memes of production.
Nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good. All right, let's see. So the first one is a comment from Mountain Lover. I challenge Charles to avoid saying anything negative about Oswald Dupree when he is brought up next episode. And if he can't, he has to wear a leisure suit with the widest collar he can find. How do you like that, Charles? Are you up to the challenge?
Am I up to the challenge? Let me tell you something. That guy has been gunning for my position in life since he and I worked for your Uncle Giovanni. And I'll tell you something. That's a long, long time. I won't say anything. All right, you know what? Yeah, he's on. I won't say a word against Oswald. Not a word.
Okay, that's great. We have some... What?
I'll just say that people can decide between us on their own without being manipulated. You compare him to me, you'll make your own decision. That's all I'll say.
Okay. So we have a comment from Oswald Dupree. Your father and grandfather may have worn your style of clothes, Charles, but I'll have you know my son and grandson wear my style. And it's glass blowing, not blacksmithing.
Well, I'm not surprised, Oswald. I'm not surprised in the slightest. I'm sure that your children and grandchildren's classmates have a lot to say about their clothing choices.
Looks like you're gonna burst, Charles.
What's that?
It looks like you're going to burst.
No. I think it's wonderful. I mean, that's the kind of admission that I wouldn't have expected from him. I think it shows a certain level of integrity.
Are you okay?
No, I'm fine.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I'm fine. And as far as glass blowing, I think that's very appropriate. In fact, I'm sure he's so skilled at it, he probably doesn't even need any flame.
What are you getting at?
Nothing. I'm sure he's that skilled at glass blowing that he doesn't require any flame.
What is that? Isn't that seems to be implying something?
No, just that he's extremely skilled at what he does best.
Okay. Okay. Well, so be it, Charles. All right, just one other random tweet that was just so out there and random and crazy. I couldn't resist it. It was tweet of the week. From Daily Roman Updates. Any wench born after 1438 cannot subsistence farm. All they know is local tavern, stare at thy sundial, show thy ankle, prima nocta, consume spice, and utter falsehoods.
Okay, well,
it's just...
This is obviously somebody who's not really interested in damsels in distress, that's for sure. Okay, well.
Can't you... I don't know, it's just... sort of stream of consciousness, utter everything that you know about...
post-medieval women.
Yes.
And the squires who loved them. Okay. All right, well, thanks very much for sharing that, I guess. All right.
Yeah.
What else we got?
That's it. That'll do it for the memes. Are you ready for the questions, Charles?
I am so ready for the questions. What do we got?
All right. First question's from John.
All right.
Hi, Vincent. Oh, yeah. Hi, Vincent and Charles. I live in Copenhagen, Denmark, where we enjoy the 6th lowest crime rate of any country. Yesterday, I received a heartbreaking call from my grandmother, a meek and frugal lady of 74, who recently sold her home for a very handsome compensation. To cut the story short, she met what she described to me as a handsome American gentleman wearing a disco suit in a local coffee shop who convinced her to spend her entire fortune on 20,000 premium yo-yos. The yo-yos are impossible to sell. Rent is coming up in a couple of weeks. I do not know what to do. Our family are in destitution. Do you have any advice?
Well, firstly, I would say that in all likelihood, those yo-yos are from very fine blown glass.
Wait, what?
The best on the market. But it's hard to sell glass yo-yos. They break, you see. So I can see why that'd be a problem. What's that?
You seem to be implying that that this man in a disco suit is Oswald Dupree.
Well, I don't really know any other American in Copenhagen who would wear a disco suit other than Oswald.
You know a lot of Americans in Copenhagen?
I know a few. I certainly know one in particular.
I think you're paranoid, Charles. I think you're seeing Oswald Dupree in your soup.
I don't think so. If I was seeing him in my soup, I can just imagine that the Jewfro coming out covered with frittaten That would be really, really, really scary, actually.
Gross.
And I don't know how he'd ever get it clean.
So, okay, well,
Those things are hard to maintain. Don't you kid yourself. I mean, I'm sure he's got to spend hours keeping his intact, you know.
hmm
And I don't believe the rumors about his tinting his hair. I'm sure it's his own color.
got it.
See, I'm saying nice things. I haven't said anything derogatory, have I?
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
However, I would say that the questioner should probably get in touch with Tumblr House, Human Resources Division, and see if they can get Oswald's home address, or perhaps his mailing address anyway, and see if it is him. Maybe I have misjudged him.
Well, we've had to make some cutbacks during coronavirus time, so it's kind of, we don't really have a functioning human resource department right now, per se. You know, I mean, we have some.
I've never noticed your HR functioned anyway, but never mind.
All right.
A lot of people on the HR payroll, but not much work getting done. I'm just saying.
Just saying.
I'm not. It's not a criticism. It's what we call acceptance. You know, I never presume to tell you how to run the company. I never have. I never will.
Well, you know, we can afford it if you would like to contribute more through the cost sharing program, Charles.
Oh, no. Thank you. I've done my share.
No.
I've done my share with cost sharing.
Okay.
You still want me to come home for Christmas, right?
All right. Well, I'm just saying, you know, you care enough to talk, but when it comes to the financial aspect, it seems you don't value it too highly.
When the pedal hits the metal, I pedal away.
Okay. All right. Time for the serious questions now.
Oh,
right.
Okay. Those.
Yeah.
What do we got?
Right. Logan has a great question. He says, criminal justice reform has been discussed multiple times by both of our presidential candidates, and the police are in the forefront of the national consciousness for obvious reasons. What was medieval Christendom's equivalent of our local police forces? If you could make some reforms of said police forces today along Catholic principles, what would you do? From what I can see, the primary character trait of our current system is apathy from beginning to end. A severe lack of both justice and mercy for the sinner. Real criminals are hardly punished as they ought to be, nor are they given the only real means to possibly reform their lives: prayer, the sacraments, a virtue ethic, etc. Aside from the clear need for evangelization and conversion, what to do?
Well, okay. The first thing you've got to bear in mind is that to reform a part of society that's so integral to society, like law enforcement, and address the issues he raises, you've got to reform the society itself. I mean, law enforcement is an expression of the society. It's contrary to all the drivel being poured out into the mental bloodstream of the country. Bad police departments are the product of bad local government and of bad society. Your police are really no better than what they're there to police. My late father used to say that the cops are the thugs we hire to protect us. And if that's all they are, then that's what you get. As far as the Middle Ages go, policing was very much a local thing, depending on where you were. Bear in mind that when you talk about the Middle Ages, you're talking about a great breadth of time and a great breadth of place. And the differences from place to place were enormous in terms of titles, types of officials, and so on and so forth. But in England, in medieval England, every county had a royal official called the Shire Reeve, the Reeve of the Shire. Now, today we call that official, and they call him in England, the Sheriff. And he was responsible for maintaining the king's peace in the county. Now, he was usually a local man. It wasn't often that they would be sent from, London. Usually it was some local person, a landowner or someone, who had the material ability to put together sufficient forces to keep the peace. Towns, villages might have constables that they would hire, watchmen of different kinds, to maintain order. And it was very catch as catch can. But there was always the idea that the king's peace had to be maintained, and that it was up to the locals to maintain it. They did not have the kind of centralized policing that we have today. It didn't exist. The other thing was that in some places in Spain, for instance, and elsewhere, they would form religious confraternities with the specific purpose of guarding stretches of highway to make sure there were no bandits. And these groups would serve as a kind of militia in time of need. So, in other words, normally the Santa Hermandad would be the lawmen on the stretch of highway going through just this province or just this village or whatever. But if there were an external threat, then they'd be militia. Now, the other thing, too, was that very often, and in England this was done through the sheriff, the local lawman had the authority to impress beyond his own band of enforcers. He had the authority to press locals into service for the law to maintain the peace. So let's say I'm the sheriff and I have 6 deputies, for want of a better word. But there's a gang coming into town, and there are 25 of them. Well, then I can impress into service 50, 100, however many locals I need to. And that was called, because every sheriff was appointed to a shire, to a county, that was called the posse comitatus, the power of the county. And that, of course, it went from medieval England to the Old West. The sheriff's got to get himself together, a posse, and go after him. Well, that's a Latin term, posse comitatus. And that, the odd thing is that in the Old West, you saw a rebirth of essentially medieval conditions. The power of the central government was very limited, so things were intensely local, and yet was being done in the name, stop in the name of the law, stop in the name of the crown. These things don't change much. So that was how it was done. Medieval justice was very rough and ready, and medieval civil courts, there was a reason why people would try to get tried by the Inquisition. And the reason was that the Inquisition had a very well-established set of rules. But in a lot of medieval Europe, the secular courts very often were kind of catch as catch can. And they had things like trial by combat and trial by ordeal, which you wouldn't get that in a church court.
Okay. Anything else on this?
No, that's about it.
Let's do a comparison of the police in Great Britain versus the police in the United States.
Today?
Yes. Because what I want to bring this to is the use of guns. Why is it that the police in Great Britain don't need guns, but in the United States we do?
Because they have a lot, usually up until recently. Now, mind you, they have guns now. They didn't used to.
Oh.
But after the Brixton riots, they started getting them. And the answer is that traditionally, Americans have been more violent than the English. we're very much still a frontier people. It really hasn't gone away. We've always been more violent. And don't forget, who were the sorts of people who came to America? And not just from England, but from everywhere. They were the malcontents, the dissidents, the problem children.
We're like Australia, almost.
Like Australia, yeah, very much so. And again, you say the same thing in Australia. It's a more violent country than England is. So is New Zealand, so is Canada. I mean, the settler countries, by their nature, attracted the problem children. And the problem children established societies. And to be fair, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand are also less violent than the United States, but more violent than Britain, traditionally. And that is probably because of the way law enforcement was and the way society was. You had the image of the crown, which was a living symbol of equity and justice. We had the flag and the Constitution and all that, but those aren't actually people. Hard to believe, though that may be for some. I think of one of my favorite Hiberno Australian songs, "The Wild Colonial Boy," which has the verse in it. Now, bear in mind, this is an Australian bushranger, Irishman, Jack Duggan, and it has the wonderful line, "One morning on the prairie, as Jack he rode along, listening to the mockingbird singing a cheerful song. Up come a band of troopers, Kelly, Davis, and Fitzroy. They all set out to capture him, that wild colonial boy. Surrender now, Jack Duggan, for you see we're 3-1. Surrender in the Queen's high name, for ye are a plundering son." He drew pistols from his belt and proudly waved them high. "I'll fight but not surrender," cried the wild colonial boy. So, surrender in the Queen's high name. Well, that was how it was done. And so they were always aware of the fact that they were responsible to someone beyond the local judge, beyond the local politicians. Not that the Queen would take a direct interest in the arrest of Jack Duggan. I'm willing to wager that if she'd ever heard of him, she wouldn't think much one way or the other. But again, it was a little bit mutatis mutandis. I remember Kipling's wonderful poem, "The Overland Mail," which is the story of this little Indian fellow who, in India, who brings the mail to the hill stations. Now, bear in mind, in those days, the mail would come from the big cities to the railhead. And they had these hired Indians who would take the mail and have to go up the hills to the hill stations to deliver it. And they'd be menaced by wild animals, there'd be floods, snow, all kinds of problems. So they'd have to get through it, kind of like our own. Neither heat nor something nor whatnot nor hail will stop these messengers. Our own postman had the same kind of ethic back in the days when delivering the mail was a much more difficult thing. But every stanza of this particular poem, "The Overland Mail," ends with a little Indian chap shouting, "In the name of the Empress, the Overland Mail." And there he is in his little bit of rags with his pack of mail. And what's his great, "In the name of the Empress, the Overland Mail"? Well, it was the same with "In the name of the King, in the name of the Queen, surrender." We didn't have that. And I think it contributed. I know people will be horrified to hear me say this, but I think in a certain sense, our republicanism, with every man a president, every man a king, contributed to our violent nature. Every man has to look out for himself. And I mean, how often do you hear that in the old Westerns? It's every man for himself, boy. Well, in a monarchy, is the vague idea that the country is a family and the sovereign is the father. In a republic, we're all free and independent. That means we're pretty much on our own. So you got to be able to defend your own, boy. You never know. Well, what do you think might be coming, Pa? Might be engines. Might be bushwhackers. Might be revenuers, son. Revenuers, Pa? That's right, boy. They want to tax our moonshine. One day, two strangers climbed old Rocky Top, looking for a moonshine still. Never come down off an old Rocky Top. Don't think they ever will. Sometimes you got to take the law in your own hands, you know. Street justice.
Sounds like the code of the hills.
That's right. It's the code of the hills. See, all these things merge and mix because cutting across racial and ethnic and cultural lines, they're at the bottom of our American experience. From the very beginning, we have been taught ultimately not to trust or believe in any government. Now, whether that's true or not, objectively, it's the way we are. It's part of our culture. What did President Washington say? Government is like fire, a useful servant but a fearful master. And that can be true and it can be false. But for the American, it's always been primarily true. And the reason why we have a Second Amendment is because the founders did not trust the government to be just. And of course, since they had created it, they certainly knew it better than most.
That reminds me of a recent development. A federal judge in Pennsylvania struck down the governor's laws, or not laws, I guess, executive orders relating to COVID. Some hero judge, 40-year-old, young guy, and I think he wrote like 50 plus pages on his decision, and he from the little I read of it, he's very common sense and smart. He says, our civil liberties are not fair weather. They're not, oh, well, we need to take away your civil liberties to handle this bad weather. But it, and this in turn reminds me of your statement that we believe government is entitled to all the power it wants so long as it's nice.
No.
And I think the problem is government's grabbing all the power it can, but it's not as nice.
Well, it's not. And again, and this takes us back to Kaiser Karl. Remember that whether we like it or not, we talk about a government of laws and not of men. But that's a bit of a myth because you'll always have men administering the law. And everything depends on what kind of men they are. We live in a society that does not breed men like Kaiser Karl as leadership. We live in a society that breeds men like every candidate for political office. That's our leadership. That's the ethos of our society. The fact that one thing we've learned is that the governments of our 50 states have absolutely no regard for the churches as institutions. That's flagrantly obvious as far as the 50 governors and their assemblies are concerned. The churches are like the Rotary Club or like a rock concert. They're not as important in Nevada as the casinos because they don't bring in any money. And it's interesting that when a few Protestant churches, of course, because, our people don't think about these lines, they figured, well, all right, you can have as many people as you want in the casino. We'll just have our services in casinos, which is what they were doing. But the government cracked down on them doing it. Now think about that for a second. Why would they do that? Well, you're endangering health to have a church service in the casino. But wait a minute. The people are already in the casino playing the slots and buying the booze and checking out the ladies of ill repute. Their health is not endangered by doing what they're doing. But having the churchgoers in there, that's a danger. Oh, okay, I get that. It makes sense. Yeah, okay, I get that.
It comes down to tax revenue.
It comes down to tax revenue. So what this points out is that, as with the Supreme Court's ruling Reno versus New London, that if the city, well, not anymore the city of Arcadia, because of the bill that was passed, thanks to the gallant Manny Romero, proprietor of Rod's Grill in beautiful downtown Arcadia. That was not a paid announcement. I just said it because I love Rod's Grill. But unless they opt out, as the city of Arcadia has, they can take your property. They can find someone who will pay higher tax, thanks to the Supreme Court. Now, what does that mean? It means that you're basically a cow to be milked. That's your only value to the government. And according to the Supreme Court of the United States, that's good. That's the way it is. They own you. Lock, stock, and barrel. Moo, cow, moo. And just hope that he warms his hands before he starts milking you.
Well, we get what you want. What I always say is, to these evolutionists, is if you believe we're animals, then the government's going to start treating you like animals. And guess what? It does. You're an economic cow to be milked, nothing more. But you are an animal, so everything's good.
Yeah, have a good time.
And
and
when you're not economically useful anymore, then,
euthanasia will take care of you.
Bye-bye. Because you're just an animal. So, okay, that's what you want. And you're going to get what you want. Everybody gets what they want. That's our real curse.
At the end of the day, yeah, it's true. But on behalf of the National League of Voters, I would like to say to our owners and masters one thing. And I mean that in every single word of it.
All right.
So what else we got?
Yeah, I have 3 questions from Rob.
Okay, Rob, you're up.
Today I am 50. It is the feast of St. Peter Claver. I know only a little about this saint. Charles, please tell us about him and his story. From what I do know about him, he seems the ideal Catholic answer to race relations in these troubled times.
You're quite right. He is, of course, the patron of the Knights of Peter Claver, Catholic fraternal order, primarily black, of which I'm a proud member. He was the slave of the slaves, the patron of the slave trade. Not in the sense of slavers praying to him to get, more and cheaper goods, but he was prayed to for the welfare of the slaves. Whenever a slave ship would come into Cartagena, we're back in the 1500s now, I think. Slave ship filled with its human cargo would land in Cartagena, Colombia, and he would, St. Peter Claver would go on board and attend to the dying. He would evangelize. He would help the slaves. Initially, in the beginning, people laughed at him and ridiculed him and made life difficult for him. But as the years went by and he refused to let that get in his way, eventually they respected him. And he became kind of a local, I won't say quite a local hero, but he was certainly locally renowned. And he got a certain amount of support rather than just derision. And he is a Jesuit, and he certainly was, well, he called himself the slave of the slaves. And he baptized thousands of them and instructed them in the faith. So yeah, he's a perfect patron for race relations.
All right. Next question from Rob. I have been reading comments online recently comparing our current situation in the United States to both the color revolutions in the last decade and Spain in the 1930s. Would Charles please comment on any similarities and give us some good resources for further reading?
Oh, golly Moses. Well, there are a lot of books on the Spanish Civil War, and I'm drawing a blank as to what he ought to see about it. Crusade in Spain, I think, was a book, but I don't remember who wrote it. Anyway, well, yeah, there are similarities, all right, in that in each case you had large numbers of people in the respective countries with very differing views of reality, and they came into conflict. The difference, of course, is that, with the exception of George Soros to some degree, neither side has any foreign backing, really. They're all homegrown. And we're not pawns in a bigger international game the way those others were. We are ourselves, proudly American, imploding. I think it's closer to 1917 Russia, frankly. But there are a lot of differences. One of them being that in Russia, the means of communication, the weaponry, all that kind of stuff was primarily concentrated in St. Petersburg, Moscow, and the region between. The communists overthrew the government and took over that area very, very quickly, giving them access to the majority of weaponry and industry and so forth, which in time allowed them to conquer all of Russia. Today, the woke spaces are the far coasts primarily and the big cities, and that's not where the weaponry and the communications and so on are. Those are out in the countryside, and they are primarily in the hands of, well, if you can say that the Reds, as in the Russian Revolution, if you say Reds and Whites, in Russia they had control of the central cities and went out from there. Well, in our setup, if it ever came to it, they would have control of the major cities on the two coasts and Chicago, but they wouldn't have access to most of the weaponry or anything else. So, on the one hand, one could see it being kind of a 1917 situation, but I think in a civil war, the whites would be likelier to win than the reds. Now, mind you, that would carry its own dangers with it. And they're the equivalent, of course, as with the counter-revolutionaries in any conflict, the counter-revolutionaries in America represent a number of different groups, a lot of different goals, many of them conflicting. If a fellow like Franco arose who could pull them all together, he could defeat the Reds. But once in power, everything would be dependent on him and his personality. And that's something I can't predict. I rather believe that that's the way we're going to go. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that in 10 years' time, when, if I'm still alive, we're celebrating my 70th birthday, I hope we can laugh about how stupid I was. But my suspicion is that it'll be put off for 4 years if the Trumpster's elected. It'll happen a lot sooner if we get President Harris. But sooner or later, there'll be a big blowback. And that blowback, in all likelihood, will bring some sort of strongman to power.
A
And
king.
nah, probably not. I don't know what he'll be. And he'll be an American. And he'll probably be wrapped in the flag and lift a cross, probably a cross without a corpus on it. And his word will be law. And the ranks of the woke will be ravaged. And I will probably find myself defending the statues of civil rights leaders the way I've defended Confederates up till now. But them's the breaks. If I live so long, I may not make it. Who knows? Anyway, that's that.
Such a Debbie Downer, Charles.
I see a bad moon arising. I see troubles on the way. Oh, don't go out tonight. It's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on the rise. Is that better?
Yeah, you make a bad situation so cheery.
Well, you didn't want me to be a Debbie Downer. I mean, happy songs for a dying planet, you know? Nobody gets out of here alive. I'm telling you. The go out in a burst of glory.
That's not what T.S. Eliot said. Is it T.S.
This
Eliot?
is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper.
That's T.S. Eliot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
It's not Mama Cass, Elliot. What? You know, there is a difference between T.S. Eliot and Mama Cass. You knew this.
Yes.
T.S. Eliot never sang with the Mamas and the Papas.
Right.
Mama Cass was not a Harvard graduate.
Right.
And although she traveled to England, she never emigrated there.
Got it. Okay.
Were you disturbed by this issue, the whole T.S. versus Mama Cass, Elliot?
Not so much, no.
So this hadn't occurred to you before?
No.
You could say you were actually indifferent toward it.
Not only indifferent, completely and totally unaware.
I see. So now are you taking a stand?
Well, now that you've informed me, I guess I'm indifferent.
Okay. All right.
All right.
I don't care. Do whatever you want on this
Glad we
issue.
got that settled. All right.
Good.
Rob's last question.
All right.
I'm sorry, everybody. I really am. Sometimes
What?
you really have to jerk the chain sometimes on the
Do you
leash.
really? Did it ever occur to you that our audience were as unaware of the whole T.S. Eliot versus Mama Cass Eliot thing as you were?
I'm sure they were totally unaware.
Well, they're not now. They can't. On the last day, they won't be able to claim ignorance.
Well, ignorance is bliss.
But not anymore. The bliss has come to a screeching halt.
Thanks
And
to
they
you.
all, well, somebody has to tell them the truth. And the truth is that Mama Cass Eliot and T.S. Eliot are not the same person. We're never the same person, and in all likelihood never will be.
Why does someone have to tell them that truth? Confusion is the guardian of truth. You told me that. Whatever happened to that?
I think it's
I think
true.
you're inconsistent and hypocritical. You bounce back and forth between creating confusion and elucidating the truth. Why don't you pick one and stick with it? Now let's move on.
Wow!
All right. Last question.
Crack that whip!
Last question from Rob. I recently received some blessed salt from our parish. I'm entirely unfamiliar with this tradition. Would you please provide some history on blessed salt and advise on what to do with it? I put it... What are you laughing about?
Nothing. I'm just admiring your forcefulness. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You bring that out in me. I'm not a forceful person, but you're just being crazy right now, and I have to find a way to bring us through this.
Crazy?
Yeah, that's what I said. Maybe turn up my volume in your headset? I said crazy.
But that's such an unkind phrase. I would never associate that kind of unkindness with you. I've always thought of you as a person who is better than that, bigger than that, above that, in fact.
Well, maybe you need to reassess.
No, I refuse to believe badly of the nephew of Don Giovanni. I refuse.
Oh, that's good of you. That's big
My
of you.
loyalty to the family is top.
Good. La familia es todo.
Si, tutti.
All right. So Rob continues to say, I put
You're still
in...
asking.
Still asking. Rob still asks, I put in our salt shaker and have found online recommendations to spread it in all our rooms, but that seems messy. So, what do you do with the blessed salt? I've never messed with blessed salt.
Well, Don't mess with Texas. Actually, there's several things you can do. You can't spread around the rooms, but understand when you're spreading around the rooms, it's not like you're dumping bales and bales of the stuff. You know, if you've got it in a salt shaker already, you'll never notice it, but it'll do the trick. You can put it on food, which turns it into a sacramental, and you can put it into water and stir it up. Then you actually have holy water.
Why is there blessed salt?
Well, salt is a symbol of immortality because it preserves things. It's used in the blessing of holy water. You bless the holy salt. The priest blesses the salt and then adds it to the water, which he also blesses. It's referred to in Scripture. You know, thou art the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its savor, what good is it for? I mean, from the very beginning, they've used blessed salt.
I guess my question is, so when it comes to blessing things, blessing a room, blessing a house, my family has always resorted to holy water. Is that in some way inadequate? Do we need to supplement that with holy salt in some way?
It's not inadequate, but it never hurts to have more. I mean, you can never have too many sacramentals. It's like I wear a 5-fold scapular. Not one is enough, but each of the 5 have different promises attached to them. And I wear a St. Benedict medal. Now, I could wear that by itself. I can do anything I want, but there are specific blessings for specific things. It's just like with the Mass. You know, you have all these ancillary ceremonies in the traditional Mass that were taken away from the new Mass. Now, the new Mass, our Lord still comes down on the altar, but you don't get the ancillary graces that came with these ancillary rites and prayers. Why? Because they're not set. Do you need them? No. But the more you get, the better they are. Mutatis mutandis. It's rather like a friend of mine put it that he compared the Novus Ordo to, as usually experienced, to a Tridentine Mass. And he said, well, in the one case, it's as though you've got bone china and linen and sterling silver, and the food is served by courses, and it's a perfect dinner. And the other, it's a hamburger and fries. Well, you're going to eat. You'll be nourished. And you could live off hamburgers and fries for the rest of your life. You could survive. It would do the trick. But it's not the same. And, of course, he then said, and an Anglican service is like Irish linen and the bone china and all that. The problem is there's no food. But the settings are beautiful. That was just a cruel addition. Yeah, that was a cruel addition.
Right. Question from William. Dear Charles, I make mention of this in all charity.
That's that. In all charity is the trad version of bless his heart.
I noticed you use the adjective bloody quite a bit. I had used this myself until I was told by someone with an English father that it blasphemes the blood of our Lord, and I additionally have read that it could also be a derivative of, quote, by Our Lady, end quote, and as such is used as a profane intensifier. However, upon further research, it appears that neither may be true. What do you know of the history of the word?
I know everything you just said, and I know that none of it may be true. One thing I do know that's true is that if we spend as much time watching our own language as we do watching other people's language, and I'm not speaking of obscenities, probably we'd be more virtuous.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question.
It's a lie, and I don't know those people.
Well, no, not that question. But how come you are so accepting of oral tradition when it comes to folklore, and that type of stuff. But when it comes to oral tradition regarding these things, well, not so much. You don't believe it.
No, I think they're both possible, but I also know that they don't. Let me put it this way: it is certainly true that the pre-Reformation English swore by Our Lady, by God's wounds, by God's blood, zounds, which is God's wounds, odds bodkins, God's body. Very much the way we French Canadians, prior to the Quiet Revolution, said things like tabernacle, which is tabernacle, and calice, which is chalice. You know, that was the way we swore. Now, in both post-Reformation English, post-Revolutionary French, the swear words, the obscenities, have to do with bodily functions. Because, of course, every culture swears by what's important to it.
Well, people still take
Say
Jesus.
odds bodkins? No, I don't
People
think
still makes me wince every time. They still use Jesus' name in vain.
That's the one thing that they will still use in vain. But normally, that's not what they say. They use the F word constantly. In fact, sometimes it's the only word they know. And they'll have like 17 different meanings for it. But that's what we're into now. That reflects who we are today. That's what we're all about, as it were. I would be more interested in avoiding those sorts of words. I really would. Because gosh darn it, it's just the way it is. And gee willikers, how excited this conversation makes me. You have no idea. Personally, I love to monitor other people's speech, and I love to correct them. I do. It's fun. I feel good about myself. I like being Captain Correction.
Alrighty.
Remember, ladies and gentlemen, take it from me. It's easier to be holier than thou than holy. That's been the foundation of my entire spiritual life.
Okay, a question from Nate. What does Charles think of German idealism?
Not a whole lot. I can't tell you what I think of it. I simply can't.
Oh, well, I have no idea what German idealism is, but I can guess now. But
He'd
tell
yell
us.
if he wanted to.
Oh,
But you've got to fichte the right thing.
wow.
No?
Wow. Okay, so
Well, if you don't like this, you can shop an hour.
I lost you a little bit. Okay.
Shop an hour.
I'm not familiar.
All right, never mind. The world is will and idea. I don't think a lot of the German idealists, frankly.
Okay. Last question for today is from
All right.
Alex.
Hello, Alex.
What does Charles think about modern music, namely rock music? Heard from many other traditionalists that modern music is bad because they say it incites the passions. Even on the podcast of the SSPX, who I greatly trust and respect, they say that the church discourages it, saying it's an occasion of sin because it incites the passions by the rhythm, but they don't cite any magisterial documents. I find this hard to believe, and I worry that it might just be a result of a nostalgia for a time in which the church was not in crisis and modern music didn't exist yet.
Well, there's rock music and there's rock music. I mean, earlier rock music, for instance, it was always all about getting married. As time went on, it ceased to be.
That's true.
Yeah. Sometime in the mid 60s, it switched from, today I saw the boy I'm gonna marry. and it became She's My Woman. Uh, I really believe in a case by case thing. I think you also have to determine what's rock and roll. I mean, a lot of people will lump Danny and the Belmonts with Elvis Presley, with the Beatles, with Green Day, with Limp Bizkit, with Blink 182, with Preston Smith and the Crocodiles, with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, with the Grateful Dead, with the Mamas and the Papas, with the Rolling Stones. It's not all the same thing, gang. There's rock music and there's rock music, and there's Keith Richards, who will of course outlive everyone. As the meme says, and I think quite well, it's time that we all stop and take a while to think about what sort of a world we're leaving Keith Richards.
There's a lot of different things to break down. By the way, I will defer to Father Ripperger and anybody else who speaks on this matter. But I think there's, as you say, you have to break it down case by case, and there are a lot of different things. I mean, you have the beat. The beat is a consideration.
You have the lyrics.
You have the lyrics. Lyrics are obviously hugely important. And also, there's one tendency in rock, I think, that's interesting food for thought. To what extent is it harmful when all of the music you listen to is about coveting something? You want something, and it's emotional. Is that a deleterious effect? See, I think, because I've thought about this. See, because I also have the same, wondering the same things as Alex, and I have to think that part of it is, I also had the thought that some music, you almost wonder if it's the devil's prayer, where it's getting you wound up and it's creating idols for you. You see, you're creating idols for yourself to worship, the way it's structured. See? A lot of different, I'm not saying anything concretely, but these are just thoughts that I've also had.
And there's also, there's definitely music that ennobles you, that lifts you up.
Yeah.
Again, earlier this evening I spoke about big band music, which I'm very fond of. Yeah. And again, when you're speaking of music that's romantic, yes, it touches on the passions, but not just the passions.
Yeah.
Whereas you've got other music that's, frankly, just about the jungle beat. And in the 50s, for instance, when Elvis Presley came along, especially because of his motions, they called him Elvis the Pelvis. That was kind of revolutionary, and people thought it was pretty awful. But time moved on, and things became stranger. And Elvis became very passé. There's some of the Beatles songs that I rather like. When I'm 64, of course, I like very much, which, however, is a throwback to music hall style songs of the 19th century, and very consciously so.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney was purposely imitating his grandparents' music when he wrote When I'm 64. So then of course, as Tears Go By is a song that really evokes what it is to be older. It is the evening of the day. I sit and watch the children play, doing things they think are new, I used to do. I sit and watch as tears go by. That doesn't really arouse the passions. It arouses contemplation.
Well, let's talk about inciting of the passions and whether that is dangerous in and of itself. Now, maybe there's more things than music that incites the passions. I mean, for example,
Clothing.
Lord of the Rings, that totally gets me passion. That some of the lines some of the stirring moments that arouses my passions.
Well, I mean, you've got to define passions too. I mean, obviously, there are some things we have to be passionate about, and not just in a bad way. I mean, obviously, we should be passionately against evil,
Yeah,
but we should be passionately for everything that's good.
yeah.
I mean, when the poem to Elbereth, I Elbereth Gilthariel, Silver and Penimeriel, we still remember, we who dwell in this far land beneath the trees, thy starlight on the western seas. Well, that paints a picture of the elves far from home, longing to be united once again with their queen Elbereth.
Mm.
And, well, I mean, my personal favorite of all of the poems, all that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not touched by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, from the shadows a light shall spring. Where he made the blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king. Well, you want to go out and lead a charge against the infidel. You know, it's the nature of that particular poem. So I don't think you can say those passions are bad. Well, you could, but I think you'd be wrong.
Right. Okay, so I guess that's the best we can do on that. It's kind of funny part of this question where it's, they don't cite any magisterial documents. Some
Well, that
things.
kind of, yeah, I mean, one of the things you'll hear people say is, well, the church says this, the church says that. Yeah, that's nice. Exactly where? I mean, that's really only one step above my personal favorite, which is, I heard that.
Hmm.
And you know how I love that phrase.
Yeah.
Mr. Coulombe, I heard that. Yeah, well, I heard the pigs fly. I heard it from somebody. And you know what? I've never seen a winged pig not fly.
Whoa, that's true. All right.
Of course, I've never seen a winged pig fly, but that's another story.
It's just amusing to me, the approach. I mean, it is a good approach to look for magisterial documents on everything, but there are limitations, I think, to the church.
Well, the magisterium doesn't function on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like with questions we've discussed, anything from cryptids to fairies. The church deals specifically with what is necessary for our salvation.
Yeah.
So there was never any dogmatic teaching about people living on the other side of the world. There is no dogmatic teaching on what is the tallest mountain on the planet. There is no dogmatic teaching as to which color is best. And no, I'm not talking about race. There is no dogmatic teaching about the laws of thermodynamics. There is no dynamic teaching about the relative merits of cotton versus linen versus wool.
But those things aren't moral or regarding good and evil.
That's my point.
But this is, to some extent.
To an extent, but you'll find people often like to invest their personal interests and prejudices with the authority of the magisterium.
That's true.
I mean, and we all do it to some degree. I mean, I can prove to you the monarchy is the best form of government from papal teachings. Now, inevitably, someone will say to me, well, you don't have to take Pius VI. Okay, so how is this not part of the ordinary magisterium? And of course, it's a trick question because nobody knows the limits of the ordinary magisterium. Could be anything. Could be anything at all. Lord knows Pope Francis is really pushing us.
uh, well, okay. Well, that'll do it. Any closing remarks, Charles?
You bet. What with the insanity increasing everywhere, I always think of the words of my old father. Then he said, if danger comes very, very close, you find yourself outgunned, outnumbered, unarmed, there's only one thing to do.
What?
Run. But no, seriously, ladies and gentlemen, don't be too overawed or upset despite the insanity around us. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Stay sane inside insanity. Autumn is coming. Halloween, Thanksgiving, and above all, thank God, Christmas is coming. And if you can't celebrate them in your normal way, celebrate them any way you can. Keep those days in your heart. Keep them as well as you possibly can. Keep Martinmas. Michaelmas is coming up. Next week, you're going to have the Feast of St. Michael, Michaelmas. I mean, great feasts are coming. The Feast of Christ the King. Keep them to the very best of your ability. All Saints, All Souls.
This year has been such a year for our family. We've kept the indoor Christmas lights up all year, and we light them every night. The colored lights over the bookcases and over the fireplace. Every single night, and we've needed it.
And I'm sure it helps.
It does help.
I mean, this, ladies and gentlemen, this year, after you take down the tree, you might want to leave up the other decorations. Contrary to the folklore, it may be come Candlemas Eve, you just want to leave the stuff alone for a while.
Yeah.
But keep the spirit of Christmas and Easter and Pentecost in your heart. And if, as I say, for whatever reason, you can't celebrate these days as you normally would, do the best you can. Mark them somehow. Even if it's just staying at home and reading something different or watching The Wizard of Oz, do something. Make it different from the normal run. Meditate on the meaning of each of these great feasts. And don't lose heart. Kaiser Karl and Empress Zita, as I said earlier, went through a lot worse than most of us are likely to. And they never lost their faith, and they never lost their confidence in God, and neither should we. I'll close with a little story about them, which is in the book. Their last Christmas in Austria was spent at the hunting lodge of Eckartsau in the northeastern corner of the country. It's surrounded by forest, and they weren't getting regular food deliveries from Vienna, so a lot of their diet was made up of whatever the emperor and the other men living there could shoot in the woods. Well, Christmas was coming, and they had nothing to give anybody. Not their servants, not the friends who were staying with them, and not the people in the village who were helping them get by. So one day while rummaging through some of the rooms, they found a box of the sort of little gifts they used to give away on official visits throughout the country. Cigarette lighters, watches, cigarette cases, this kind of stuff. And that's what they gave away that Christmas of 1918, when nobody had enough to eat and everything was so horrible. And interestingly enough, if you go to Eckartsau today, some of the villagers still treasure the watch or the cigarette case that the imperial couple gave their great-grandfather that Christmas of 1918. But despite everything being lost and the prospect of worse to come, they kept that Christmas, and they kept it as well as they possibly could. Interesting enough, too, the emperor was sick with the Spanish flu on Christmas Day. So he was only able to come down for a few hours. But he did. And they had the tree. The tree had these, they've got a reproduction of it in Eckartsau. And I mind you, it's one pitiful looking tree in terms of the decorations. It really is. But the same attitude is what we all need during this very difficult time that we're living through, and the other greater difficulties that may be waiting ahead of us. But if we keep the same attitudes that the emperor and empress had, that even if we don't survive it, we'll get through it. We'll get through it with heaven at the other end. And at the end of the day, heaven at the other end is the best you can hope for. Even if all your days were quiet and your life was prosperous and without a worry in the world, that would still be the only thing you could hope for at the end of the day. So, don't feel bad, ladies and gentlemen. Wave your blue ribbons and feel good. Christ won the victory. Death has been defeated. Christmas is coming.
Okay. So.
Oh, but that does leave one question.
Go ahead.
No, you ask.
So if it's Monday,
it's off the menu.
And the soul you save
may be your own.
See you next time.
God bless all. Take care.